As a child, it was traumatic, the bullying and stuff. I stored up all this pain inside, and then it just came out sideways. I was like a time bomb. I found alcohol and stuff. Cocaine turned into crack cocaine, and then onto heroin. Some years back, I overdosed and I fell backwards and hit my head on the kitchen steps. The reality sort of kicked in that I'm going to die if I don't get help. So I have my son in recovery. This is where I believe again in this higher power. The grace was given by this higher power, and when I was given that surrender, I was there for my son who really needed me.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Jonathan.
Hi Jonathan. Thank you so much for being here today, for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Before we get to your introduction, I'd very quickly like to thank the listener for being here today, and also say that I'm still interested in hearing from people from other fellowships than CA and AA. So if you're a member of a different fellowship, and if you'd like to be on 12 Steps and 12 Questions, ping me an email on 12steps12questions@gmail.com. That's 12steps12questions@gmail.com. The email address is also in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Jonathan, would you like to introduce yourself quickly, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Silvia, for asking me. It's my pleasure to come along. And my name's Jonathan. I'm an addict. I'm a member of 12-step fellowships, and I'm over 2 years clean and sober.
Well done.
Which is a miracle. I originally spent the first part of my life in Northern Ireland, and then I moved over from Northern Ireland to London when I was turning 18. So I've been in London now for quite a long time.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. Let's get straight to the first one of our 12 questions. Did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
That's a great question, Silvio. When I reflect on my childhood, and I look back, I was young growing up in Northern Ireland, and it was a time of the Troubles as well. So as a child growing up, I grew up in a lot of fear. On my father's side, his mother was Catholic, from a big Catholic family. I've got like a lot of cousins on the Catholic side. And then on my mum's side, it was the Protestant side. So I was kind of sent to a Protestant school. And I was told as a child, not to mention my father's side of the family. That they were Catholic. So that was, it was like a secret that I carried really as a child. And I think growing up where I grew up, there was a lot of dysfunction basically growing up. There was a lot of underage drinking and stuff, and I picked up a drink at 9 years old. It was, the first time that I drank. And there was a lot of bullying growing up. It was quite rough, the children, growing up.
Was that because of what's the word I'm looking for here? Segregation, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it was just, it was, I think partially, there was, there was something in the air, so to speak, There was it was a lot of fear happening at that time amongst families and stuff like that. So I was subjected to some bullying growing up and stuff. And
around being half Protestant, half Catholic?
No, because I kept that secret. It was just like the older kids that were involved in a lot of bullying.
Yeah.
And I think when I reflect back, something that really kind of hurt me a lot was that one of my best friends, he turned on me, and he was violent towards me, and he was a much bigger than myself, so. Yeah. That kind of affected me growing up, really. The sort
There's
of this
betrayal in there, isn't there?
Yeah.
There were times in my life where, as a maybe 12, 13-year-old, I was bullied. And thankfully, it didn't last very long, I have to say, but it's difficult to put into words how much it can get under your skin and how long you carry that thing with. And another thing that I just realized, though, just listening to you, is there's on the one hand, of course, what happens to you personally, so bullying, for instance, and stuff, but also if you grow up in something like the Troubles, because we're like sponges, especially as children, you're going to take in all that tension and all of that, and you'll carry it with you without knowing, I guess. So that must have influenced you as well.
Yeah, totally. I think the whole fact of growing up, I mean, it became more sort of aware. I was told before I went to secondary school, but then when I experienced my secondary school, it was in a town which was a loyalist town.
Yeah.
So they were burning Catholics out of their homes, and the stuff is passed on, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the children were very very loyalist, so to speak, growing up. So I think it was the fact that I felt separated. I felt there was a separation going on. And I guess that was because I wasn't being my true self.
Yeah.
When I reflect now and look at that in hindsight. So it was kind of that secret that I carried around.
So is that the secret of the fact that half of your family was Catholic?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And was there anything wrong with being Catholic, or would it have been the other way around if you were Protestant? I'm just trying to get my head around it.
I think it could have went two ways, to be honest. Yeah, but I think for me, what it was, I would have been subjected to more bullying, and I would have really experienced that.
Yeah.
I mean, I did experience some bullying at secondary school, as well.
Yeah.
But I think the fact if I had disclosed that information, I would have had a really hard time. I would have felt very, very separated. And I think my family were really aware of that.
And did you think to yourself at that time, were you aware that in other places of the world it wasn't like this? Or did that not come until much later?
That didn't come up till much later.
Yeah,
it didn't come up till much later.
This is just the way things are. This is the way life is.
Yeah, I just felt that when I was at secondary school, I wanted to move and go to a Catholic school. And my parents didn't allow that.
Yeah.
So I was, I'd already entered into school, and I had a big rebellion from that. Yeah. I think that what happened to me was that, as a child, it was traumatic, the bullying and stuff. And I think then, I got to a point where I stored up all this pain inside, and then it just came out sideways. Like I was like a time bomb, so to speak. When I found alcohol and stuff, I got into a lot of trouble at my secondary school and at college.
Yeah. Now, our second question is, what did the moment you first got hooked, or the fun times, what did that look like? I mean, with the caveat, of course, not everybody experiences fun times. For us addicts and alcoholics, fun times, certainly for myself, there was a lot of partying. I was having a good time. That's not always the case, of course. So you said that you picked up your first drink when you were 9, which if you think about it with a sober head, is almost incomprehensible, really. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was given a drink from a neighbour who lived 2 doors up, and he was around 16 at the time. Yeah. Maybe 14 to 16, so I can't actually remember his age, but it was around that, 14 to 16. He was at secondary school, just about to leave, so it was around that period. But yeah, he gave me this can of beer, and straight away I loved the effect. And I was hiding in this bush, away from my mum's house, and my mum came looking for me, and I was like being quiet in the bush, and she actually caught me, and I can remember that just like yesterday, and I loved the effect. Produced by the alcohol. I didn't like the taste, obviously, but the effect. And then leading on from that, I would say that the place that I grew up, there was a lot of underage drinking. So the older kids would buy the younger kids alcohol, go into the off licenses and stuff.
Yeah.
And, we would congregate, and I was involved a lot with other kids in underage drinking. So there were.
How old were you then?
To be honest, young, like 12, 13. Wow. Yeah. 12, 13. I was smoking cannabis at 13.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I dropped acid at 14. Right. And mushrooms, magic mushrooms as well. So those were fun times. And I didn't see anything wrong with it because loads of kids were doing it as well.
That really reminds me of the fact that when I was, 14, I started a bit later, 15 maybe, smoking cannabis in earnest every single day, and buckets and bongs and all that, and drinking, lots of drinking as well. It was totally normalized at that time. Really, if I look at it today, then I realized that it wasn't normalized for all the kids. It was just normalized to the people who were around me. And I think that we sort of congregate, those of us who have difficulties, even at that early age. Maybe you've got a few people who are experimenting, but the kids I thought were cool and I wanted to hang out with and did hang out with and used and drank with me all the time, they were kids who also had issues in one way or another. And I thought that was just normal. It gave me this idea that this is just normal, nothing wrong with it, nothing to see here. Was it similar for you, do you think?
Yeah, totally. I can identify with that. Totally. It was normalized. It really was.
Yeah.
And I think the culture in Northern Ireland, around alcohol, there was a big culture. There's a big drinking culture, in Northern Ireland and in Ireland at that time. So yeah, it was very normalized, going out and drinking and stuff. Yeah.
Did you get into trouble at this point already?
Yeah, I got into trouble at secondary school. I turned on teachers at secondary school.
Yeah.
And I can talk about this. What happened was the teachers back then were very sort of violent. When I say violent, I mean they were just, it was, you would get hit,
Really?
Yeah, you would get hit. It was that.
Okay, let me just stop you right there. When is this? What year are we talking here?
We're talking
late 80s?
This would have been around, let me see, early 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Northern Ireland in 1982, you were hit as a student.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Wow. You got hit with keys. I got hit with the Bible round the head. I was.
We'll talk about that in question 6 then. Yeah, but go on, yeah.
But what happened was I'd built up resentment, and I think the fact that the bullying that I had experienced growing up, I got to a stage that it was fight back, like as a kid, fight back. And I started to fight back and I started to rebel. And I remember the teacher like shouting at me and, just being very aggressive. And I could, when I look now in reflection, it was resentment that I was in. And so I got a list of the teachers that I resented with a friend, and a friend that had left school, who had just left and got his driving test and was driving. And we got together and we knew where the teachers lived. Some of them lived in his town, where he knew the doors and stuff. And what we did was we put on balaclavas and we got into his car and we drove around to these teachers, and we were knocking their door and throwing like stones and stuff, and they came out and saw us in the car with the balaclavas on and stuff.
I'd imagine in 1982 or 3 in Northern Ireland, if you've got knocking someone on your door with a balaclava on their head, that's going to scare you.
Yeah, I mean, it did. We didn't really think of the repercussions.
No.
We sort of had our little hit list of teachers that we just did not like. And it turned out that one of the teachers was part-time RUC. So he was in the police force, and he was able to trace the car. And we got caught for that. And that's when I got hit with a Bible over the head by the vice principal, basically, the second. kind of high up teacher that called me to stay behind assembly. And I was very close to getting expelled, you know, and I didn't think of the repercussions in that at all until my family sat down with me. And,
Isn't it interesting, though, that if I think back at that time, right, I didn't get hit because in 1984 or 5 in Germany, you didn't get hit over the head. But I did get into a lot of trouble, disciplinary trouble at school, primary and secondary. And I identify with what you said. I was in this sort of perma-resentment, for lack of a better word, right? And I also decided that I was going to fight back. You know, it's what reactions do we have? You know, fight, flight, freeze, or fawning, as I've learned recently. And mine was fight as well, right? I was not going to be beaten. I felt justified that, you know, I'd be allowed to fight back and do stuff, right? And this massively fueled my drinking and using, although I had zero awareness around this at the time. Would you say that this would be true for you?
I kind of knew what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't really have any sort of role models, I guess, around me. The kids that I hung out with in school were disruptive.
Yeah.
So we kind of all gelled together. So yeah, birds of a feather flock together, I think. And yeah, you know, I would say looking back, there was no real sort of like role model who I could look, you know, up to, who had maybe, you know, had left that school and, you know, went on to, you know, to do really well in stuff.
And if we look at your drinking and using, how did that progress from there? Because at some point we met in the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous. So at some point other stuff came into your life.
Yeah, I mean, it started with the drink, and I had that allergy, you know. When I put that first drink into me, I would drink to oblivion at quite a young age. There was no real, there didn't seem to be any control around alcohol. You know, when I went to college after I left that school, I went to college and I'd go to the pub at lunchtime, you know, and I'd go in with the intention of having one drink, and I'd end up with 6 pints, you know, and being like 17 years old, you know, six pints is a lot of alcohol, and then going back into college and, you know, getting into trouble through drinking, you know. And then that progressed, you know, moving to London. I moved here when I was just turning 18. And I'd already, you know, picked up cannabis at a very young age, and that continued. Yeah. And then cocaine came into my life, and that's when I noticed that it progressed. You know, it really did progress as soon as the cocaine came in.
Yeah. Did you have any idea that this was doing something for you couldn't do for yourself, or was there no awareness around this? I mean, I, for one, didn't, right?
For me, cocaine helped me it allowed me to drink more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I found, that I was using it. You know, I'd done my first line probably around maybe 18 and a half, you know, 19 maybe. And I'd done my first line in a pub. And it was sort of normalized again, you know, people that were going to the pub were playing pool and taking cocaine. And this was sort of before the rave scene came around. Yeah. So I had that cocaine, and it gave me the ability to drink more, you know. I'd taken amphetamine before speed, which is what I would use to drink more. But yeah, the cocaine, it gave me, I suppose it gave me a confidence. It was a false confidence, really. But it did give me a confidence, and it allowed me to, I guess, sort of control my drinking.
Yeah, very much in inverted commas, of course, or control your drinking, yeah. Our third question is, what were your worst consequences, and finally, your rock bottom? Now, I need to caveat this. One, not everybody has a rock bottom, many people have more, and so on. But also, we're obviously covering quite a substantial amount of time of your drinking and using, you know, in this question. So how did it progress to the point where you started noticing things are going haywire here? I'm having real problems.
I think in the 90s, so, when the rave scene came around, late 80s, early 90s, my usage really took off. I'd really crossed that line. And I was using, pretty much every day. My mental health got affected, and I can remember, I had been out for a whole weekend, and not eating properly and taking, copious amounts of cocaine, and I remember coming back in and seeing my son's mother, who was really, really angry at me, and I remember double dropping to ecstasy, and I fitted, and I was taken into hospital, and I had a near-death experience as a result of that.
Right.
It would have been around 94 or 95.
Yeah, let me slow you down there just for a second, if you don't mind talking about it, because not enough gets talked about. I think particularly about ecstasy and amphetamines in general. When you say you had a near-death experience, what was that like? Or rather, what happened? Not what was that like, what happened?
All I can remember was I was rushed into hospital, and I was on the bed, and on the hospital bed, and I felt that my soul was being taken from my body, and it was like coming out. It felt like some sort of like astral projection, and it was slowly being pulled, and I was aware that it was light. There was light that I was going to, and it was family, but I couldn't see. It felt like family, and it felt like generations of family. And it was like they were sort of, I could feel their love and their warmth, but I'd never met them. But I did see, like, the first people that I saw was my grandparents. Yeah, like they were like sort of like holograms or silhouettes. And I wasn't conscious.
Wow.
And my soul, it felt like my soul was being pulled from my body and was going somewhere, into this light. And then my mother rushed in to the hospital. She had got word of what had happened. Yeah. And she came into the hospital, and she shouted my name, and they let go, whoever they were, wherever I was going. Yeah. And I felt my soul slowly coming back into my body.
Yeah. That experience as fundamental and as beautiful almost as it was, did that stop you using?
No, it didn't. I mean, my mental health got bad, I started to develop psychosis, through using so much. Yeah.
So what's that mean? You saw things, you heard things that weren't there? Is that what that meant for you in this particular case? Yeah,
it meant that I saw things. This was after, after this experience in the hospital. It's like every time I used, I felt that there was like a presence or an entity, like a dark energy, like that I could feel when I was using, and it felt quite terrifying, really, for me. Yeah.
There was no more fun left, really, in that.
No, there wasn't, and I continued. That was the insanity around it. It was knowing that this isn't fun anymore, that the good times had gone. Yeah. And the same experience was happening over and over again. I found that my using, I was sociable for many years in my using, and then it was sort of like reverting to just wanting to be on my own, really. Yeah.
There's an experience I share, and I've often spoken about. I just removed all the people from the party until it was just me and cocaine and drink. Right, that's all I really wanted. Everybody else was just kind of in the way. Right. Did you stay with cocaine and alcohol and speed, or did you go somewhere else from there?
No, after sort of the rave scene, it was like cocaine. It was sort of like ecstasy, cocaine, ketamine.
No.
And then what happened was I split up with my son's mother due to, my addiction and stuff and my behavior. And then I tried crack cocaine. And the first time I tried that, I didn't like it. I preferred, lines of cocaine. It felt very intense and very Moorish, and I didn't like it. And I thought, I'm not going to do that again. And a few months later, I was spending all my money on it, totally powerless.
Yeah. What happened then? You didn't like it? And how long did it take you to do it again, even though you didn't like it in the first place?
It was a couple of months. Yeah. The first time that I took it, I didn't enjoy it. And then it was a couple of months later. And then I think after the second time, the third time that I took it, it was, full on binge, like a whole weekend of, using crack.
And then you did enjoy it.
It was like I was chasing that high. It was like, it was a different experience from the first time I tried it. The first line of cocaine that I tried, it hit me, it done the trick. But when I took crack cocaine for the first time, it did hit me, but it was very intense and very Moorish. But, I'd say the third time that I did it, I had an all-out binge where I just, I could not stop.
Yeah.
Chasing that high and, yeah.
What do you think is the difference, generally speaking, between snorting cocaine and smoking it, really? What are the differences in your opinion?
I think that when you smoke cocaine, it's a very intense hit. I think that you're getting more of a purity. Especially for me, I used to wash cocaine up in freebase it, and it was more of a rush that you would get. It would sort of numb my brain for a very short amount of time, but it was very pleasurable in that. So it was a very intense hit. But then, it would wear off, and that's where you would be chasing it again. Whereas I guess I was sort of more in the illusion around sniffing cocaine is that, that I was sort of in control of it.
Yeah.
That I could space it out, but that, that changed as well. So.
Yeah, it's not my experience, by the way, with snorting cocaine that, you can space it out. Not at all. I was just spaced out of anything. But I think it's an interesting conversation, this, and I think there's a major difference really between the two, I think, and the way it affects you, and also, of course, how detrimental it is. Were you able to hold down a job at this time? Were you able to be in a relationship?
Yeah, no, my life changed a lot from when I split up with my son's mum. And it was like my addiction accelerated. Cocaine turned into crack cocaine. Yeah. And then onto heroin.
Right.
And I was an everyday crack heroin user.
Every day?
Yeah, for a lot of years. And I had sort of, before that worked and stuff, and then I had periods of, it was just crime, committing crime to pay for my habit. Really.
Sure. Yeah. So you were stuck in that, committing crime, getting gear, using gear, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
For how long? Totally.
That I would say for a good 10 years.
My God.
Yeah, like a 10-year period.
That's a long time.
That would have been like I'd split up with my son's mum around, I think it was 1995, and then I moved and I was living in King's Cross, and back
in the 90s.
Yeah, back in those days there was a lot of drugs around, and there was a lot of addicts, on the street and stuff.
Yeah, famously.
Yeah, and so from that period, I was sort of like, I was working. I had periods of working, but then when the full-on blowing heroin addiction took over, I was just out committing crime.
Were you physically dependent?
Totally physically dependent.
Right. I think addiction comes in so many forms, doesn't it? And in so many, there's different layers, I guess, and so on, but I think when you get to being physically dependent, it's a whole different ballgame altogether. Yeah. And so your worst consequences, and then finally your rock bottom that took you to the rooms What did that look like? How did that develop?
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
There was a lot of I lost my flat. I was homeless, in the 90s. Just turning late 90s, turning 2000. I lost my flat that I was living in. That near-death experience was a really big consequence. There were lots of big consequences. Another one was overdosing, having overdoses. Just luckily, someone was there to help me and stuff. And then sort of bringing it up into recent times, the relationship that I was in prior to the one that I'm in now, some years back, I overdosed and I fell backwards and hit my head on the kitchen steps. And I was out cold. My partner, who I was with at the time, found me.
No.
And that sobered me, the fear of that. And I'd have an attempt of coming into recovery. I need to sort this out. Like I could have, the reality sort of kicked in that I'm going to die if I don't get help.
How much did you think to yourself, I'm an addict, right? Was there any sort of admittance to that? What did you think, oh God, yeah, I really am, I'm screwed, I'm an addict? Did that occur, or were you lying to yourself more?
I was lying to myself for a lot of years.
Right.
And to be honest, I didn't, I think a lot of it I put down to, well, it's just depression, it's because of my actions. I've hurt sort of the women that I was in love with, my son's mum.
Yeah.
You
hurt them through your addiction, you mean?
Yeah, it was that. It was like I put that down to the guilt that I had, the guilt that I was feeling and the depression of, of feeling a failure and stuff. But I always thought that I was going to change. Like I thought, this is not lasting forever. Like this is gonna, I'm just going through a bad period.
It's a phase.
Yeah, a phase. I went to prisons through my addiction as well, committing crime and stuff. And
how long were you in prison for?
It was short periods. I went into prison 3 times, and the longest sentence was 2.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I came.
Did you use in prison?
Yeah, I did. The first 2 times that I was in prison, I used heroin in prison.
How'd you get heroin in prison?
There's lots of drugs in prison. Not so much now heroin, it would be spice that now is the sort of drug that everyone seems to be taking in prison. But at that time, it was heroin was available in prison.
How'd you pay for it?
By using the items on my canteen. So I can remember it was like, this is over 20 years ago. So it was 3 items for a tiny bit of heroin.
Right.
Yeah. So I used to use heroin in prison. And then the 3rd time I was in prison, I ended up being able to stop heroin. And my cellmate, he was taking heroin, one of my cellmates, like different cellmates throughout the sentence. And he was taking heroin, he offered it to me. And I remember just saying no, and I thought, I've got some power here, like I can say no.
Yeah.
And I really thought to myself, I'm going to, sort my life out when I leave and stuff like that. So I was smoking cannabis in prison and drinking hooch, which is, homemade alcohol that's brewed up in prison. But, I was not smoking cannabis every day, but I did use it throughout my sentence. And, I sort of separated the drugs, cannabis and alcohol. Were just mild drugs. It was like my problem was heroin. If I take heroin, I'm going to commit crime. I'm going to come out back to prison, and the crack as well, but more so the heroin. So I felt that I had some control over it. But the first day that I left prison, I relapsed.
Right. Now, here we are. You're a full-blown addict. You're physically dependent. You've had different prison sentences that you've gone through. You've lost your flat, you've lost your jobs, you've lost your girlfriends, and so on. At your worst, and that's our question 4, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide?
I think I was committing suicide. I think that's what was happening all the time. I think that, me going to oblivion, with my drug use, as soon as I set it off, that allergy, I'm gone. I'm going to keep using in that compulsion.
Yeah.
And I think that subconsciously, I think that I did want to die because I had the near-death experience. I had overdoses.
Yeah.
It's loss of, I don't have any control, when I put one inside.
Yeah. And also awareness, of course, especially with what you've already gone through, that whatever you use could possibly be the last time you use.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Our question 5 is, what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the rooms?
The gym.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
right.
I'd say the gym.
It's a very popular, it's a popular one for this one. I myself tried that,
Well, I started to train in when I was last in prison, I got a job in the gym, cleaning in the gym. I was very, very gaunt when I, went into prison, and I kind of, I took, that helped me get through my sentence doing that job. It got me out of my cell, and I started to train in the gym, and I thought, when I come out of prison, my mum actually got me a membership for Virgin. They just opened.
Other gyms are available.
Yeah, she got she got me, as a sort of it was a gift really, of coming out, trying to help me really. So the gym. Okay. That didn't work. Right. I ended up training in the gym and then going and smoking crack afterwards.
Right. Okay. Did you ever try to moderate and with any sort of success?
Yeah, I did. I tried to function. Like I tried different jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the addiction, it's always there. It's always there.
Yeah.
And it's patient, It's
the addiction
cunning.
is.
Yeah, it's patient, it's cunning. As soon as the money would come into my hands, that would be it. What I noticed was that when I wasn't using, I was always thinking about when I can, but I would tell myself I would live in that lie really, and I would focus on the outside stuff. So, let me just get this job. Let me go, I'm going to be okay here.
Yeah.
Or let me, if I get into this relationship, then
I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. So very much looking outward to kind of fix the internal.
Yeah. And that's really interesting what you're saying there, I think, because it's a natural, very human thing to do, isn't it? Once I get the next job, I'll be fine, and I don't know, once I find the perfect partner, I'll be happy. That sort of thing. You don't have to be an addict for that. That's quite sort of, I want to say normal human behavior, right? But it's particularly true for us addicts, I think. We're looking for outside stuff to fix us. If I have a child, then maybe I'll stop using. If I've heard it all. We've had it all before, in the rooms, but it didn't help, obviously, right? Our question 6, this is where the Bible comes back that you were bashed with over the head, comes back. Our question 6 is, once you were in the rooms, did you struggle with the word God?
No, I didn't struggle with the word God, but I think that I felt bad growing up. Like I did get into, trouble, like I said, growing up. And I was very rebellious against authority. And I got into some trouble at college as well, in Northern Ireland as well. And I think that I carried a lot of shame really. And I felt that I was a bad person. So I felt that God didn't want to know.
Right.
So that's how I felt.
So you sort of anticipated a rejection.
Yeah. I think that I anticipated a rejection from God.
Yeah. That must be a place of deep, deep shame and deep bitterness, I guess.
Yeah.
Real darkness.
Yeah. I mean, I would pray to God, whatever God was, when I got into trouble.
Yeah.
Which is very selfish now when I think on it. But so I did believe that there was a higher power, that there was a God, but I did not believe that God wanted to know me.
Isn't it interesting how we can be cut off from a higher power? There's so many ways, right? I, for one, didn't really think there was a benevolent God out there, right? And if there was, then not for me, right? Some people have found God, but they don't seem to be able to connect to it. Other people may find, like you said yourself, that if there is a God, or I think there is, that he doesn't really want to know much about someone like me. There's so many ways of being disconnected. Yeah. Question 7. How do you experience your higher power today? It's also a good place for some God moments if you want to share any. But how do you experience it today?
I really see it through people. So people coming into my life at the right time.
Yes.
Hearing something, synchronicity. I feel when I'm very connected. So, I connect through meditation and prayer. Just having that quiet time and praying and stuff. And when I feel that peace and serenity inside, and I feel very connected. Like I can give you an example. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like I left my flat one day and I was walking down the high street and I was looking for the bus, and then all of a sudden this woman needed help in her buggy to go through this door.
Sure.
And I was exactly at the exact moment. She had 2 kids in one buggy. It was like a double buggy. And she was struggling to push this buggy through the door. And I was just there in that moment to push the buggy for her. And she turned around and she just gave me this big beaming smile. And she said, "God bless."
Yeah.
And I sort of smiled, and I felt that sort of like goosebump feeling.
Yeah.
And then another one was, I've had a few sponsors over my time in recovery, and one of them had relapsed and I didn't know what to do. And I called a friend up and he said, "Well, you've finished this step 1. Trust this power, trust this higher power, because you're in recovery." He was just basically saying to me, like, trust the power, you're safe and protected.
Yeah.
Because you're doing everything for your recovery, and you genuinely want, surrender, you want to surrender. And he said, don't look for another sponsor. He said, don't sort of think I'm going to get this sponsor, that sponsor, this sponsor. And I remember just sort of like thinking about what he said, and I thought, you know what, he's been around 27 years in the program, and I thought, let me listen to this guy's experience, And I walked out in my high street a couple of days later and bumped into this man who was in recovery. And intuitively I knew to ask him, and he said, yeah, so he was available. So the sponsor showed up for me at the right time in the right place.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer that when I'm connected, then, a lot of things are going to happen. And that's, I believe that's the path that I'm on,
Yeah, it's a wonderful example of synchronicity, of course, that you've just given there. Great. Amazing. Yeah, these things, they do happen more and more frequently. The more connected we are, the longer we do this. Our question 8 is, which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you?
I think step 4 was a difficult step.
Mm-hmm. Why?
I'd had an attempt at step 4 before, and there was people that I didn't want to forgive. There was resentments that I had towards people, and the forgiveness side of it, I wasn't willing to look at my part. I was very much the victim, and if I'm a victim, it's going to be difficult to recover, and I stayed in that victim sort of mentality. It would have been the step 4. I had attempts at step 4s throughout my journey of coming in and out of the rooms, you know.
How long were you in and out of the rooms for?
A lot of years. I first came into a meeting in 2003 in prison,
Right.
the 12-step fellowship. And then I came into the rooms in 2005, 2 years later after. And I stayed clean for about, I think, 14 and a half months it was. Yeah. I had some sort of experience, but it's not the experience that I have today. Yeah, and I just, you know, I'd go in and out of the rooms basically after 14 and a half months. I picked up, and, you know, I've been in and out of the rooms for years.
Yeah, yeah. Step 4 was difficult for me only because, actually, simply because of the same reason of what you said. And for the listener who might not know quite yet, step 4 is where we make an inventory of ourselves, and essentially we write down every single resentment we've ever had, basically, as well as our fears, and where we've hurt other people, our harms, and sex conduct as well. And I'm assuming that most people, addicts or not, are quite unwilling to have that sort of an inventory done on themselves, right? And simply because I suppose I think we've all done things that we don't want to look at. We all have resentments that for some reason or another we don't want to get out of. But of course, as addicts, as alcoholics, or whatever our affliction might be, we're forced to do this. And we're forced to look at our own part in these things. And I was as unwilling as you were to look at my part. And what you said there, victim mentality, you wanted to remain a victim. If someone had come up to you at that time and said, "Do you know what, Jonathan, you want to stay a victim," how would you have responded, do you reckon?
Angrily. Yeah, angrily.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Question 9 actually. Which character defects give you most trouble?
I would say justified resentments.
Wow. Let's hear that concept, justified resentment.
Well, yeah, I can, like, I think it's around the where I'm powerless.
Yeah.
So if I'm powerless over people, places, and things, so I'm powerless over a situation. For example, noise in my flat from above.
Yeah.
And then basically I speak about that noise, and then the noise stops, and then the noise starts again. So then I will get, it will bring up some anger towards me, because I've already had conversations around the noise happening during the night, and then it's like the noise is stopped. So it's then I will sort of think, well, I'll take it personal, basically. So that's what, justified anger.
Yeah.
But I have the tools to deal with that today in recovery. So that's just an example. And I don't stay angry at all. Like, I don't stay in anger. So.
Yeah, it's dubious luxury, I think the book calls it, which I think is quite true. And I don't really miss resentments and anger that last for weeks and weeks and months. You know, we can't afford to have those. So, yeah. But I like this concept that you just pointed out there, the justified resentment. It's not just any old resentment. No, it's the one where you really think you're right. You know, you know, there is a sense of being entitled to having this resentment. You know, it's okay to have this resentment. Other resentments, maybe not so much, but this one, you know, I'm really entitled to have it. Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really good. Question 10 is, what is the best thing that recovery has given you?
There's lots of good things. It's hard to choose. Well, a massive one is my son.
Right.
Is in recovery. So I have my son in recovery.
Yes.
And that came about that, you know, this is where I believe again in this higher power. You know, the synchronicity and the timing. I think there's the actions that you can take around coming into the program and surrendering, but I do believe there's a grace given by this higher power, and the grace was given, and the timing of it, when I was given that surrender, I was there for my son who really needed me.
Right.
Who was
So
in a
this is
bad
the
way.
son that you were referring to earlier.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. He's also an addict, and
you were able to help him.
I was there at a time that he really, really needed me, and I took the big book with me.
Yes.
Around, and I stayed with him in his flat, and
You 12-stepped him.
12-stepped him, and he's now in the program.
Wow. Yeah. You said a wonderful word just there, grace. How do you experience that?
I think grace for me is, it's hard to put into words.
Yeah.
It came to me in an experience, as in, like, I had many attempts at recovery, and, I was being dishonest. It was a big block for me.
Dishonest in your recovery.
Yeah, well, lying to myself, and,
Yes.
not being honest, like, fully with sponsors, about what's really going on and stuff. That took a long time to become honest, and I have to continue to practice being honest.
Yeah.
Grace was a feeling of peace that came over me. That's what it means to me. It was just this feeling of this peace that was deep down within, and it happened when I opened that book with my son.
Yeah, wonderful. Our question 11 is, what would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
I would give them the self-test questions.
Go on.
Yeah, I would actually, I would send them the self-test questions. If I was in contact with them, I would send them over. Which really is it's self-explanatory to. I think that those questions really would help someone who's maybe in denial.
So what are those questions? You mean the if you honestly want to stop, can you stay stopped? Can you stop and stay stopped?
Yes, yeah. And, the behaviors around, do you think about cocaine? Or do you think about drugs when you don't have drugs? Have you ever lied, stolen, or,
yes,
to get drugs? Those questions, I think, are something that are really good for someone who's unsure. Who's actually unsure. Yeah.
I mean, the book is really quite clear, isn't it? For a start, it does say you can't diagnose someone else, obviously, and I think great humility shown actually in that book to say, we think if these two things are present, i.e. you have no control over your drinking once you've started, and two, that if you honestly want to, you can't stop and stay stopped. But still that they give these tools, they give these definitions, but they don't go as far as to say that we can tell you if you are or aren't alcoholic. I think there's great humility shown in the book, but that's what the book says, isn't it? But you're quite right, there are these other questions, that we use, and I think there's a self-test pamphlet. Yeah, absolutely. And they're really good, helpful questions. Have you lied about this? Are you hiding your drinking? All those sort of things might be a little bit easier to get you to those two central questions, really, which are, as I said, the one about control once you've started drinking, and being able to stop and stay stopped if you really want to. Great stuff. Our last question, question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote unquote, at the pearly gates?
Been waiting for you. I think that's, I say that sort of jokingly because it's like, it's something's kept me alive throughout all the relapsing.
Yeah.
It wasn't my time to pass away. So a lot of years of in and out of addiction, and I think that some things kept me alive. And I think my mother calling me back when I had that near-death experience shows me that it wasn't my time, and it was my time to be there for my son.
Yeah.
when he desperately needed me.
Yeah. There's a lot of grace in that and a lot of beauty in that. Thank you, Jonathan. Really like to thank you for your honesty, your courage, your generosity in coming onto 12 Steps and 12 Questions today and answering these questions. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome, Silvio. Thanks for inviting me along. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, we're still rolling. Do you feel you said everything, or did you leave anything out that you feel needs to be said but wasn't expressed for whatever reason?
I think it's all right. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't
left everything on the field, so to speak.
Yeah, I prayed around the questions before, we...
Sure.
And I just spoke from the heart. So, yeah. I don't think there's anything I would change. I don't know how it came across. But
Wonderfully. But sometimes it does happen that maybe there's something that we really felt we wanted to say or an experience that we didn't share, and, now would have been a good time to share it. But if there wasn't, there wasn't. It was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, no, I think that's it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you, Jonathan.
Oh, you're welcome.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-step recovery program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not-for-profit. And you know this next bit. It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.